All right. Let's see if this is going to work. Never done this before. Come on in. Zubin, Saturday Night Live. And we're streaming vertical. Why? Because we can. Apparently it's a thing on YouTube that many people hate. So I was like, fuck all y'all, let's do this. The more complaints I get about something, the more I want to do it 20x harder. Come on down. Let's talk about all the things. Let's see if this is actually streaming. Yeah, there we go. Ashley Stewart's here. All right, all right, all right. So let me know, is this showing up on your phone as a vertical video? Because that's what I want to try. I want to play around with. The last time I did this, I did it from my phone, but I want to do it from the studio since I got all the things. Hey, Lauren, Dennis. What's up, Jana? And Nocturne121. So you can only leave comments on the live video if you're a subscriber, because I want to weed out the bullshit and just keep the bullshit I know and like. I want to create my own echo chamber. Rhonda's here and Elizabeth. Okay, it's vertical. Thanks, Jana. Cool. All right, so before I went live, I was I didn't come to the studio tonight to make a video. I came because my wife is out with some friends and the kids are like tucked away at home studying for stuff and being nerds. And I was like, I'm gonna go to my man cave and just sit. And so I was sitting in the man cave, and then of course, as usual, I start fiddling and I'm like, oh, I wonder if I can create a vertical video from my actual studio setup. And then I figured out how to do that. And then I was like, oh my God, nothing is happening. And I don't mean nothing's happening with the video. I mean, nothing is happening. Like, this here and now is not at all what the mind puts it together as. Not at all. And I debated, can you even talk about this, right? But every single person listening, apparent person, apparently listening to this apparent bald person, is like this same radiant no thing. And this is something that it was so apparent as children that many children, when they start to get a little older, can actually have existential terror. They can actually deeply touch into the fact that there's really nothing happening. This is a completely impermanent radiance in and as this indescribable no thing that's so beyond mind that mind is grasping for a foothold or a toehold or any kind of hold, a parachute, and there's nothing. And little kids are so close to that. Sometimes this shows up as a kind of existential terror. And I wonder if there's people, you can leave it in the comments, if you've had experience of that as a child or even as an adult, that kind of it. And really the dread or the terror comes from this interaction between who we think we are, which is this mind-created, conceptual entity that thinks it has a past and a future and is standing on solid ground in a world of objects and all of that. And what's actually this, which is to call it a mystery is just the best word we can use, but it's really just not knowable by that same mind. And the sensation of just falling into people will say it's like a void or something, but that's the thing, is it's not. Can you guys, like, if you just sit still for a second, you can feel into what has always and already been here. And to say that it's here doesn't even make sense, because it can imply that there's somewhere other or some time other than this. And this that I'm pointing at, trying to point at with words, which is like pat, 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 is the potentiality, this unborn, unmanifest awakeness that is not other than everything that you see. And there's no distinction, there's no separation, there's nobody doing this. Nothing is really happening. It's just this radiant, mirage-like energy. And look, people will be like, oh, what are you smoking and all of that. It's like, I'm smoking reality. This is sober looking at this. This is the end result of direct inquiry into this moment by you. No one else can do it. And so it's funny even trying to talk. I mean, why? I guess we can point, right? So what happens here, all I can say is this experience here is sometimes you're having, you're going through some dark night of the soul or the dark Saturday night of the soul live. And, your emotions are coming up and stories are coming up and the mind is creating problems so that it can solve them or try to solve them, because that's the only problems there are mind-created problems. Reality is no problem because it's just exactly what's happening. And that can happen. And then suddenly attention can just dissolve into this no thing, which can't be talked about in words, but you can point in its general direction because it's got no direction. It's this. And it is empty of objects, and yet is the isness, the knowingness of all objects. And you can't call it consciousness because well, you can call it whatever you want. It's just words. It doesn't mean anything. Call it a big giant dick in the sky. It doesn't matter. It's just what it is. It can't be anything else. And it's always this. It's like the radiant furnace of now. And all of this is just like the heat lines you see on a road on a hot day, that kind of radiant mirage. It's there. You're seeing it in the sense that it's a real appearance, but it's made of nothing. And that nothing is awake. It's awakeness itself. This unmanifest, unborn potentiality. And if you think I'm crazy, just look at what quantum mechanics says about the quantum vacuum. It's nothing, and then stuff pops out into it and then dissolves back into it. Is that really different than what you can experientially know? Can't know it in the mind, but you can actually in-see it. I don't know how to say this. It's here now. It's never not been. It's all there is. And all of this is just a kind of radiant appearance. And when you really see it, all those problems, all that emotional stuff, all that dark night stuff just goes poof, and you just start laughing. Because it's seen as something that never was, and yet as a mirage, absolutely is. And both are absolutely, simultaneously, paradoxically, bewilderingly true. And so all of your human condition, all of it, solid, real, sure, as far as that goes, absolutely, and not at all. Not at all. And what is that? Freedom. It's freedom from suffering, from clinging, from fear, honestly. Because if we believe what our thoughts say as truth, then we're this separate shard in this sea of danger, and everything is a problem and a danger that needs to be solved. And it turns out there's none of that is really true. It's, boy, I don't know. I don't even know why to talk about it, except that I can't not. That's the other thing that becomes clear is like, who's living this? Who's doing this? It's like life itself is doing this. So I've stopped caring about whether people think, oh, what the hell is he talking about? I thought he talked about medicine all the time. Oh, I thought he wanted to build Health 3.0. And now all that may be still true on a relative sense, but like this is also true. And this is actually beyond true and false. It's just this. In the end, that's what awakening is. It's seeing everything just as it is. And that sounds like, what do you mean just as it is? Like, well, that's a table. It's a table. It's just there. No. This is drop table. Drop just there. What is that now? We're pointing at this radiant, empty, awake perfection that, I don't know, the more I talk about it, the more I wish I'd just not. Because I'm realizing, yeah, my mind is going, wait, how do you talk about it? You can't. Let's see what some comments are saying. Z, I think the void is behind you. And yeah, I turned the light off back there just because it felt correct to do. Ashley says, I'm sitting here giggling like a complete weirdo. I mean, this is it, right? It's the funniest fucking thing in the world. Let me tell you guys, let's just cut all the bullshit for a second. Forget about everything. Forget that we're on YouTube, which is like kind of fucking hilarious, like that this even exists in this make-believe world of bullshit. When you just look right here and you and you realize what's actually happening or not happening and what's doing it, which is not this. And not some entity either. That's what's very strange. It's very paradoxical. Nothing is doing this. It's not even a doing. And yet everything is showing up in its right place. So how does that make sense? It doesn't. It doesn't fucking make sense at all. And that's exactly right. Because it cannot make sense to the thinking mind. The thinking mind, what we think we are, our human selves, this story is another one of these radiant mirages reflecting itself in a way that creates a sense of space and time. That's another appearance. But are they absolutely true? No. Are there objects here? No. Is there separation between an apparent me and an apparent you? No. There's just this unfolding mysteriously now. And here's the really interesting thing, because the mind will be like, oh yeah, I can see that now. No, 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 no. It has always been this, eternally. It has never been other than this. There is no other place. There is no other time. It is always this. So what you remember as your childhood self, this happening thisly. And it just gets impossible for mind to wrap around at all. Lauren says, should get some good old THC while listening to you. That would be epic. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it would. Maybe you'd just be like, or maybe you'd just be like, yeah. I'll be honest, like, certain drugs, even THC, heck, you can get good and drunk, psychedelics, they can glimpse you into this. But the problem is when you come back, the mind arises in a state of normal mind identification and is like, oh, that was bullshit because you were just tripping on this drug or you were high or whatever, man. And like, yeah, it totally made sense at the time, but now it's just totally silly. Yeah, of course, mind is going to say that. So what happens when you have a clear mind? In other words, mind is still functioning without drug, but you're seeing exactly clearly this. Well, then there's a clarity. There's a kind of a deeper knowing that cannot be shaken, even though doubt will still arise, even though doubt will be like, oh, you were just meditating, you were on retreat, or you just had a moment, whatever. The doubts will be there. Those are thoughts, but there's a deep, now there's an unshakable knowing that no, that's what reality is. And it's just apparently obscured by thought, going to thought, going to thought, going to thought. And even that is fine. Even that is fine. There's no reason to fuck with that unless you feel called, in which case that is just, again, part of the unfolding. Like the whole awakening thing is just part of this inevitable unfolding. You're not doing any of it. Give yourself a break. Give your fake, made up, imaginary ego, which, by the way, calling it imaginary doesn't help much because it shows up like a mirage as reality. And as long as there's belief there, you're going to feel like a person, like a solid person moving through space and time with problems, a future death coming, and, taxes to pay. It's funny. It reminds me of The Matrix, where Agent Smith is sitting and interrogating Neo. And he says, Oh, you live in two worlds. In one world, you help your neighbor across the street. You pay your taxes. In the other world, you live entirely in this like complete different realm. And in a sense, that's what this is. It's like but the difference is there's no two worlds. There's only this. There's no separation. It's like two sides of a single coin. They're inseparable and they show up like this. What a miracle, huh? That nothing can show up as everything always, now, eternally. And I was going to say it's been doing that, but that makes no sense because there isn't a past. There's only this radiance of now. And, okay, Zubin, you're crazy, whatever. That's fine. It doesn't matter. But I mean, I guess, I don't know. Old Jesus might have said stuff like this. Buddha said stuff like this. The Muslim mystics said stuff like this. The Christian mystics said stuff like this. The Kabbalah and the Jewish mystics point right at this. In fact, many of the old religions started with this pointing. Now, there were many times in history where if you pointed like this directly at the nature of reality, which is beyond God and not God, by the way, what do you call this? You can call it the radiant face of God, and no one's going to dock points off your test. But it's beyond that description. Like it's completely compatible with any religious belief and no religious belief. It's just this. It's just reality. And words like unconditional love and bliss and all these things, they can arise, but they're just dumb words. You can't talk about this. But you can point. You can point to your own direct experience. No one can show you this. Again, to quote the Matrix, Morpheus tells Neo, I can't show you. I can't tell you what the Matrix is. Okay, you have to see for yourself. You have to go there. I can only take you to the door. You have to step through it into this void of knowing beyond the mind. Kind of knowing that isn't of the thinking variety. That's why I think about AI and all that. It's like, sure, why can't AI do just what a human does? It's just bullshit. All of it, thinking. It's all just reflective nonsense. So why can't a computer do it? I used to think not. I used to think, no. There's something unique about human consciousness that machines will never be. There is no consciousness. It's another radiant nothing appearance, this thought space, this infinite thought space, which is a beautiful place to hang out. That's what the transcendental meditators will talk about, or the, Krishna consciousness people, or these other guys, they'll say, oh yeah, just rest in this sense of transcendent consciousness and you'll be the entire sky and the entire universe and you'll be, one with God and unity. And that's all beautiful. Those are all experiences. They're all more appearance. And you can get stuck there, actually, in these kind of blissy, which for many, it's like, well, shit, if only I could get stuck there, I'd be fine. Yeah, right? Because the human condition is so fucking shitty. It's so goddamn delusional. It's really funny. Like most of our days, we go clock in at a job at some fucking workplace. Deluded bosses, deluded employees, deluded customers, everybody acting like a fucking jackass, everybody trying to protect this shard of a separate self. And all that can be seen through in a second, and then you just laugh and you're like, and the funny thing is, then you can still show up at the job. You're just like, yeah, and you can do everything. It's like not like you become a total dumbass. You're just like, yeah, let's play in the dream. What else are you going to do? What else is there to do? And who's doing it when that's really seen? And listen, here, I can only speak from my own experience. Like, that gets seen. And then it's like, oh shit, nothing. Who is even, what is this? And then the mind will come back. And some other like identity structure, some other like repressed energetic knot will show. And then it'll feel like separation again. But there's a deep knowing underneath it. There's a deep knowing that, nah, it's not really that way. This is just another modulation of the mirage, which is fine. Monica says, okay, never use the phone for ZDoggMD. Always iPad. Don't like vertical, although tonight is better than last week. However, did Z-Many. The Z-Many. However, the Z-Many. Ooh, I don't know what that is, but I get it. Yeah, vertical's weird. The only reason I'm doing it is because it shows up in YouTube's funky shorts shelf, which is all that fucking YouTube seems to care about anymore. Unless I talk about COVID or some other bullshit, which I don't want to because it's done. So I thought, let's do a vertical video. And people who look on their phones and stuff will enjoy it. People who watch on TV and things won't. But I am recording it in standard 16:9 widescreen. So if there are clips that we like or whatever, we can put them out in a standard format. And for my people on locals, my supporters who pay the $5 a month or whatever that support the show, I'll put a recording of this up in 16:9 widescreen so you can enjoy it in 4K resolution. I used to care so much about that shit. I still kind of do because the conditioning is there. Like I just love tech stuff and just pushing the edge of what you can do all the time with video gear and audio gear and microphones and fancy lenses and different lighting and different software and different platforms and different formats. And what else is there to do? But if it all stopped tonight, I'd be all right. I'd be okay with it. A lot of you would too. Shut the fuck up, Z. Yay for both, says SHTHED something. Hard for me to see. Juliet says, looking bad arse today, Z. Oh, Juliet, you in your New Zealand talking hella shit. Sarah says, I'm running off my phone data, so your resolution is already downgraded to save on data. Good for you, man. Don't give the man your money. So, it's funny, like if I click on any kind of news feed and I see something like dropping aid on Gaza and the parachute failing and killing 5 people, the first thing that comes to my mind, there's compassion, like, oh my God, because people are, as much as I say all of this is illusory, which it is, it's all kind of mirage-y, and the absolute reality that is not separate from it is like, it's just, you start laughing because it's so perfectly what the fuck, unknowable, and yet right here. And it's always been, and you just laugh because you're like, I can't believe anybody thinks otherwise. And yet here you go 5 minutes later thinking otherwise. I'll see the news like that, like this parachute thing, right? And there's this outpouring of compassion because suffering is, it doesn't matter if it's a mirage or not. It's experienced by the one that thinks they're real as absolutely real. So in a sense, imagine this. Okay, you want a fucking horror show. Here it is. Here's reality. Complete, empty, radiant awakeness. No thing, no self, just lifing and pouring forth energetically all these forms. And one of that pouring out is human consciousness itself, which is this reflective kind of capacity to reflect these sense appearances and create auditory sense reflections called thoughts and visual sense reflections called thoughts, because thoughts can be visual. They can be any of the sense gates reflected, or they can reflect another thought. So thought, reflecting thought, reflecting thought, reflecting thought. Now imagine that this reality, this isness, this unborn, unmanifest perfection radiates this. And one of those radiances is consciousness, and that consciousness is human consciousness. And part of the aspect of that radiance, that reflectivity, is that in this, it can appear that there's nothing but thought, and that thought is what's real. And that belief starts to form out of this no thing. Now there's human belief, and identity and separation. And now what was a sense gate, some painful stimulus that we call painful, is now ruminated on in thought and placed in time. Oh my God, it didn't used to be this way. And is it ever going to end? And oh my God, what's going to happen to me? And now there's suffering because an apparent self has spun up, been born, and is living its apparent life and is suffering. So even though it's absolutely empty of any substance, if you feel into your body right now, try to find something that's solid there that isn't just energetic radiance. When you really look, when you're still and present, and learn to modulate your attention, maybe by meditating for some period of time and then turn your attention into the body, there is nothing there but energetic radiance. That's it. But this doesn't know that. And now there's suffering, and that suffering is felt to be as real as anything. So now something perfect and no thing and without any division shows up as division and separation and suffering. And that suffering is profoundly real. It's a horror show in a sense. Like you have this beautiful technology of reality of no thing with infinite potential showing up as a human that suffers. So this is why even when this apperceiving of reality happens, there's a deep, immutable drive to do less harm in the world, to move towards suffering with unconditional acceptance and love, including your own, including and especially your own. Because it's seen, oh my God, look at what's actually here. Look what you think's here. Oh, how horrible that there's that suffering. So then you see a parachute land, it kills 5 people, and then you feel into the fucking decades and hundreds of years and thousands of years of human fucking delusion that led to that clusterfuck. And it's all illusory human bullshit story in human consciousness. That's it. And it ends in abject suffering for everybody involved. All of them, everybody. Decades of fucking delusional separation, religious bullshit, like my God's better than your God, my God's the only God. Fuck off, all of you. Are you fucking high? Look here now and tell me that there's a your God. Look here now in this. When you touch into that, and this is the thing, you can touch into that. And if you've been conditioned all your life to believe in there's only my God and everyone else is a fucking whatever, it doesn't matter what religion it is, you can come, when the mind comes back, it's going to package that deep understanding as a kind of, oh, I did see God and it is my God. And fuck all y'all. It can get dicey. That's why you got to go all the way. If you're going to do this, I mean, you don't got to do anything. You don't got to do shit. Doesn't matter. But if you're going down this awakening journey, don't stop. Don't stop in consciousness. Everything is God, unity. Keep going. Keep going until there's nothing left. And honestly, who am I telling this to? I'm telling this to me, to the me that still thinks it's here more often than not. That's who I'm talking to. Who else is there? Oh my God. Hey, George. Alexandru says, every meaningful revelation in my life was a result of reflecting on traumatic and suffering events. Yes, so suffering is the gate. When I talk about it being a horror show, I'm talking about unexamined suffering where it's not a gate, where it's just suffering. But suffering can provide the window, the ripping open, the looking here. It's like a car alarm that gets bumped, like there's a thief nearby, and that thief is thought stealing your attention, making you think that this is this way conceptually, and it's beyond conception. And that suffering, really, it puts it in time, puts it in space, and puts it in a you. That's the recipe for suffering. Crisis on YouTube says, even if I play a video game that I know is just inside the computer that runs the game, it does not mean that I cannot give some sense to the experience I'm having playing the game. Absolutely, and that's the beauty. Video games are a great example of this because, or a virtual reality video game, let's say. You can lose yourself deeply in virtual reality, which is what this kind of is. These are goggles. They're put on reality, and reality itself is like, it's the knowingness, the isness that's, in a sense, playing the game, but in a sense, is the game. It's everything. And so you can, the beauty of this is you come into the body and you go, oh God, well, here we are. This is it. This is exactly right. And you live your life fully. You feel everything fully. You love unconditionally, and you hate at times. You get angry at times, and it falls away, and it falls away, and it falls away. And in the end, nothing sticks because nothing is really happening. It's always an eternally this. Indescribability. It's really good news, you guys. Like, it's beyond good news. Everything is okay. Everything is beyond okay. And so you can watch these things happen, and you can feel everything, and you can feel the sorrow of the world, and you can feel compassion for others. You can feel anger at fucking stupidity and aggression and idiocy. Everywhere you can feel it, and it falls away, and it's all ultimately felt to be this. Radiance. And so where do actions show up? Well, you're not doing the actions. Life is acting. But there's something about this momentum of breaking the prison of thought identification that then you show up in the world just a little bit different, maybe a lot bit different. And you can't say how it's going to be. But I'll tell you, the people I know that have gone deeply into this, man, they feel a lot like pure love and equanimity. And they still feel things very deeply, very strongly. There's no avoidance here. This is not a detachment. It can go through that phase for sure. You can go through those detached phase, the nihilistic phase, all that. That can happen. But man, it is not that. At its deepest, it's not. Oh, tonight's daylight savings time or whatever, or the end of day, I don't even know. It's bullshit. Isn't it funny? People are like, time is real. Yeah, is it? You're just fucking with it every year in the United States, most states. It's bullshit. Just stay on standard time. Why the fuck do we do this to ourselves? Oh, I like to have a little more light in the day and the night. And it's like, fuck off. We evolved on this planet. All the clocks are made up. Just do your fucking thing. Maybe we should start work later and end it earlier. Or maybe we should reevaluate what a corporation is. What even is that? How do these things work? Like, man, human shit is just, wow. What is that? Medicine is a great example. We do so many things that are so compassionate and direct, and then so many things that are just like, what the fuck are we doing? Man. Hey, Risa. But all the peeps working tonight get 1 hour less. They deserve it. That is, yeah. I've been on all sides of that, man. I've been on call getting the extra hour of call. I've been on call losing the hour. And both are great. Actually, no, only one is great. Crisis on YouTube says, we're the actor, the director, and the producer of the experience of reality. The experience of reality, yes. I think you could say something like that, right? But it's a little solipsistic. It's kind of a little bit saying, okay, this is what I meant to say. Thank you. That's a great comment. This is what I meant to say. Earlier when I said you get trapped in these kind of like, I'm consciousness, I am God, I am, one with God, all of that. That's all great. That's an identity. That's another experience. This that I'm pointing at has no identity. This that I'm pointing at is exactly everything as it is, and also absolutely nothing, and also beyond everything and nothing, because those are thoughts. This that I'm pointing at is more truly what you are and isn't a you. Every shred of an identity ultimately can fall and be seen through. Even the identity that I am consciousness, or I am everything, or I am the author, producer, and director of this, that implies that you are doing something, which implies a subtle separation between you and the something that's done. But in reality, it's just doing. It's doing. Debbie does everything. That's betraying your age, if you're citing Debbie Does Dallas as OG porn. Jana says, do you feel that we need to become observers and practice responding over reacting? That's a beautiful practice, the observer. So saying, okay, I'm not this. What am I? I'm the observer of all this. Beautiful. And that's one further degree of freedom. And it turns out I don't need to respond to this. I can sit and observe, and I don't have to react. And this is all true. But what happens when the one who's felt to be observing, wherever it is, and the one who could or couldn't react is seen through fully? Then the question of reacting, responding, observing, all of it falls away, and it's just this. It's just the next thing. It's like in Zen they say, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. But there's no one doing it. And there's no stakes. And yet, the life is lived so fully, so energetically. And that's the other thing that tends to happen is a lot of the energetic feeling in the body and these energetic kind of vibes, for lack of a better word, I mean, everything is energy, they start to be expressed, be felt much more directly than when we were fully mind identified, because so much of our energy is in thought, is used to maintain this illusion of self and identity. When that starts to relax, those energies are freed and they can be felt. And I can just speak from personal experience. It's like every cell on your body is like lit up with electricity, or currents of energy are going from your toes to your head, or vice versa. Or there's a feeling like a burning hot supernova in your chest, and it's just, and there's a weird trust that arises, but it's also really can be quite disconcerting. Jolts of energy can happen. My kids sometimes laugh at me because I'll just be driving or something, and it'll just be like, ugh, like just a jolt. And they'll be like, oh, Dad's having one of his moments. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know where that comes from. It's just, you just feel the energetic. And sometimes it's associated with an emotional charge. Sometimes there's a thought that might trigger an emotion that triggers the energetic. Sometimes it's just energy. And I think trying to think about it, trying to analyze it, that's all fun for the mind, but it keeps you up in thought. If you can drop attention at any point, like what's a practical takeaway from all this voodoo bullshit? Drop attention in the body any chance you can get, and stop labeling it body. Stop labeling it hand, chest. Notice when you're visualizing your body, like, oh, here's my chest, here's my abdomen, here's my legs, and let that be seen as a thought, and that's fine. And see if you can let it go and just feel the energy field of the body as it is. And notice that when the labels drop, when the visual images drop, there's just sound and color behind the eyes and radiant, energetic, ephemeral clouds of energy in what we were calling body. But drop the label body, drop the visual of what body is, and just feel, just allow receptively, like dilate your attention as big as it'll go, and sit receptively in whatever is arising. See if labels arise, cool, let them go too. They're another appearance, and do that. Just keep doing that. Just keep doing that. Any chance you get, you're sitting in a staff meeting, you're in the car. Obviously in the car, don't. When you're driving, please don't do this. Don't close your eyes and try to fucking do this. But that doesn't mean you can't be hyper present. Dilated attention. Driving is happening. Senses are wide open. Notice how much occurs automatically. And in fact, 100% of it does. Because any effort, any apparent doing is just thought. It's just reflective consciousness, which is another radiant, no self happening. Catherine says, with Suzanne Chang this weekend in Asheville, Catherine Mashburn. Yes, Suzanne is doing her first retreat out there. And I know another person who's there currently. I hope you guys are having a wonderful... Suzanne will throw you right into the void. I mean, I'll never forget, what I'm talking about. Actually, this is a perfect comment, because by the way, Suzanne's channel is Suzanne Non-Duality on YouTube. She came here and we hung out for a week, and we did that show, and my wife had this big awakening, whatever that means. It's not an event. It's just like click, whoa, fuck. But the way that when she and I would just sit and talk and point, she'll just point right here and say, look, right here, everything is just as it is. There's nothing happening. And this nothing has been not happening eternally. It's always this. How did we think otherwise? Those thoughts are this. Everything is this. There's nothing left out. There's nothing to heal. There's nothing to fix. There's no attainment. There's no guru. There's only and always this indescribable no thingness. Sometimes when you really feel that, when you really know that, it's here. It's never been otherwhere. There's nowhere to go. This hero's journey is a journey from here to here, from now to now. There's no path, and yet there appears to be a path. There's no you, and yet there appears to be a you, and all of that is this. The appearance, the non-appearance, the bliss, the horror, all of it is this. Perfect. Not two-ness. And sometimes that'll light the body up like it just did for me. Like every cell in the body is just tingling with aliveness, and there's no explanation. There's none needed. It's the raw energy of this moment without concept telling you what it is. Concept is just thought. So what is it without concept? It's just this. Any other word that you add is making more concept. So what is here that is prior to, beyond, and without concept, but accommodates all concept as another appearance? Nocturne says, yes, words limit when it comes to describing feeling, Ashley. Yeah, I mean, the words limit. Okay, let's be... All right. Words are fucking trash. They cannot scratch the surface of what this is. So we resort to things like poetry, music, art, using words in obtuse ways to point directionally. That's all we can do. So when we start getting crazy about reading about spirituality and reading about awakening and reading about non-duality and all that, we're often prone to falling in the trap of conceptualizing this thing, which is beyond and prior to. And the only way in is completely free of mind. Mind can't even put a toe into what this is because mind is an emanation of it. Jesse Zhang, what's your favorite sports team? The Fresno Beavers. I'll leave it to you to figure out whether I made that shit up. Nocturne feels it too. Crisis on YouTube says, I love that episode where you talk about your wife's awakening. Pretty much 80% of your content I've watched. Wow. I'm so sorry. It's funny though, like, yeah, I talked about that with Angela like that week that it happened. And then the interview I did with Suzanne, she was actually in that interview. But I edited that part out because I did, why put that public? It'll just confuse people unless they're really interested. And over the year since that happened, I've had a lot of people email me asking for the unlisted version of that video. And the truth is I give it to them, but it's not going to help them because you're just seeing somebody day one post-awakening and you're not seeing anything. Let me say this again. And my wife and I agree about this. She's like, why do you even, you can share the video, I don't care, but like, why? Nothing happened in a way that anyone can apperceive. I mean, anyone can talk about or know in the conceptual way. So why confuse people? And I totally get it. We went through it. It was one of the most remarkable things for both of us because I had a massive shift too. But it's like, right away, that wasn't a thing. Nothing happened. If anything, something stopped happening. Selfing and thought identification just suddenly stops. And you just see things as they are, what I'm pointing at. Everything just as it is. This. That's all. It's so simple, you can't believe it. That's why when it happens, often people will be like, nothing happened. And then the ego comes in and it's like, yeah, I had awakening and fucking bliss and fucking no self and fucking this and that. And it's like, listen carefully. What identity is claiming this? I know, I've been there. I do this. I've done this. It's treacherous. So yeah, it was fun to talk about, but I look back at it and I'm like, nothing happened. I think I said it in Angela's video. I was like, there's not even consciousness. How can you even talk about it? It's just, and people go through this phase too, where it's like, shut your mouth about all this. You can't say anything about it. Angela was in this phase for 15 years after his awakening in 1997, I think. He didn't say a word. And, because what could you say? What can you say about it? It's so simple and direct, and yet also like so beyond what like we think is going on that all you can do is giggle and just, and then the good stuff happens. Then all the emotions arise and everything that you've been repressing and all the energetics happen and the reactivity comes and the ego comes back and makes it stand and all the shit gets crazy. That's why you don't even really wish it on people because it's such a hard path. But on the other side of it, you're just like, oh, it couldn't be any other way. Like it's, God, how could I can't even imagine what it's like to not at least have had this degree of seeing. Like how hard that would be. And yet that was all of life to that point. That's the human condition, except for maybe early childhood for some. Tanya Garner says, some of the things you shared of what your wife and after unwound something, of what your wife said after unwound something in here. Thanks for that. And that's the reason I talked about it, is that many people are in these sort of relationships too. And my wife was so clear right after this, especially. She still is. Like, it's still unfolding. Like, she's ridiculous. But like, she would say things like the next day, you know, and there's a lot of emotion too. So there was a lot of like, at one point it got to be so much in those couple weeks after that I thought, you know, did I make a mistake even exposing her to this? Because she's feeling everything from residency training, from all these things that had been suppressed. And it was hard. Like, I mean, really hard. Really hard. Everything was coming out. And luckily, we knew how to hold space for each other because we'd been through it together. But she would say things like, you know, thoughts are like little birds tweeting. They're actually rather beautiful. There's nothing to worry about there. They're just these beautiful little birds. She said a lot of crazy shit that was just right on. Like, and this is the funny thing, like when that shift, and I hate to even call it that, but it is, experientially it's experienced as a shift in perception, but in reality it's just a stopping. All the wisdom of the ancient masters, like you can read almost anything anyone has written and go, yeah, it's weird. It's like, yeah, that, yeah, that's true. Of course that's true. Duh. Yeah. It's weird. It's like suddenly you've been given a Rosetta Stone. And then it starts to, you know, mind comes back and it starts to close down a bit. And again, it gets a little apparently murky. And then the real work can happen. Anne says, go back to Ian's question. It's a good one. Okay, which one was Ian's question? Ian. I don't see an Ian and I forget. So you're going to have to remind me. The bird is a word, George. Yeah, nocturne mind always comes back, pretty much, I think. I think there are probably some who get free liberation very quickly, but for most, it's like mind, so many years of conditioning, it's still there, the thought going to thought going to thought. It's just, it's seen like, okay, this really isn't true. But you can still get, you know, Adyashanti calls them these Velcro thoughts that really loop you back in. I think a great book for people who've had awakening and are wondering what the fuck, or why did I lose it, or what's going on now, is The End of Your World by Adyashanti. Phenomenal book. And he has an audiobook version and an actual book version. I actually prefer the book version myself, but your mileage will vary. Oh, there, Ian. How do disagreements feel in person? How has realization changed the texture of difficult conversations? It's interesting, Ian. Things are felt much more immediately. So it's harder to be inauthentic. It's harder to, if you're feeling something emotionally, to not somehow express it directly and bluntly. But it's still possible to do those things. But it's felt like you're like, ooh, this is frictional. So when conversations are had that are a little inauthentic, you feel it at the time and you feel it afterwards. You're like, that was not a good conversation. Whereas probably prior, you would just say, yeah, that's just a typical give and take of a human conversation. And so what tends to happen is when things get difficult, when there's arguments, sometimes the raw emotions can show up, but they're very short-lived and they fall away. There's a lot of directness, but there's also a kind of what Adyashanti calls a pivot towards peace, if this makes sense. So somewhere in the conversation, if things are getting heated and difficult, there's an ability to hold a kind of infinite, unconditional, equanimous space, so that you just realize, okay, this is okay. This person is playing out their conditioning and I'm playing out mine. And that's beautiful. And in a sense, there's really, I mean, in a true sense, there's no separation between us. So this anger can show up and it's okay. And it can still feel weirdly like a kind of perfection. And so there is a kind of moving towards discomfort that tends to happen, as opposed to an avoidance, a kind of leaning in. And by the way, there's different degrees of this. So this doesn't maybe happen all at once. And actually, right after awakening, there can be just a lot of confusion and overwhelm and, a kind of sense of just being kind of blown out. That's why you probably shouldn't make big life decisions right after something like that, like a big shift like that. Or maybe you should, I mean, I tell you, the first time I went on retreat, I came back and I'm like, I don't need to make videos anymore. Like, why am I doing this? This is egoic. And then the second time I went on retreat, it was more clear. It's like, oh no, like if there's pointing and people are helped, then that's a beautiful thing. There's a kind of even though it's not necessary, there's a kind of a rightness that's felt. And then the next one, it's like, oh, actually there's even a different kind of expression here. And so it's always kind of changing and shifting. And so even within the conversation, you'll feel that flow of the conversation changing. And there can be a pivot towards a more peaceful sense. Like, okay, I've expressed a lot of anger. This happened to me recently. I talked about it. I expressed a lot of anger. I expressed a lot of dissatisfaction. And then there's a feeling like, okay, I can pivot now. There's a pivot point where I can display more of the love and understanding that I know is the innate nature of this. And I can do that even in the setting of this, especially in the setting of this difficult conversation. And it just kind of starts to happen. And I'll tell you, I've had a few things recently come up like this, and it's been like that. There's been a pivot point where it's gone from difficult to just like, okay, I think we have an understanding that comes from an openness. There's a kind of a tendency to be open and vulnerable. So to kind of, even in difficult arguments, there's accountability held, but there's also a reflection in real time. Like, listen, this is not so much about you, this anger. It's really about frustration I'm having with myself for not being on top of this or not expressing honestly how I felt earlier and letting it build up, stuff like that. Ian says, thanks for answering. In my experience, it's almost impossible to lie, even white lies. I can't bring myself to go into someone else's delusion to make them feel better. That's beautifully said. That's what I mean about kind of authenticity. And this is a matter of degrees, right, Ian? So like, there are times when you can like be complicit in others' delusion. There's so much practice doing that. And then as identity starts to fall away and fall away and fall away, post-awakening especially, it's like it falls and falls and falls, and then it becomes almost impossible to it. Now that doesn't mean that you tell the truth in order to hurt people. You're so blunt. There's a discernment that arises. I think Angelo, the Buddhist sort of lexicon, kind of calls it prajna wisdom. Like there's a deeper flow of life that is guiding you, and it shows up, and often it's almost inevitably compassionate in a deep sense, which can mean tough love. But it often means it's a directness without the hurt. So if it's hurtful to tell someone a full truth and you know it's going to cause harm in the short run, you don't do it. At the same time, you don't continue to be complicit in delusion. That's why like it'd be really hard for me to be a therapist now, say, because when people tell me their problems, it's like, I can't tell them, well, you can reframe it this way, and you can probably just kind of, the dude's probably okay. You just, you want to think of it this, oh yeah, that is hard. Maybe you should do some affirmations. No, it's like, okay, that's all great, and it's traumatic, and it was bad, and it was hard, and you can feel all of it, and it's all okay, and it's also all complete illusion. But you wouldn't say it that way, right? You would kind of embody that to some degree, just by holding space. So like that's people like Suzanne do this beautifully. They hold this space for whatever you're coming to express. You have a million problems that have been driving you crazy. You're angry. I do this when I'm expressing to Angelo or to Ishwar or to anyone that I'm talking to and I'm having an issue. I am deep in the game. I'm like, yeah, I had this anger outburst, and I had this, and I had that, and I had this. And they hold this open space for it. And then they just point you right back to, okay, that's great. It's all this. It's all this. And then maybe some different, they'll all have different ways of kind of getting at it. But in the end, it's you that has to sit with it, that has to feel it all. And it's you that's making the problem, ultimately. And that's not to say that, to blame the victim and say, oh, see, it's all you. It's all one happening. There isn't a you, there's only the happening. That's kind of what I mean by you. June says, Zubin, would that affect you if you still practiced? Doctors must hold something back. This is a good question. Sorry, I just need to look at something here and make sure the stream is working correctly. Oh, good. Okay. Okay. So when I was practicing part-time, full-time, whatever, this was already coming online, and it's when in the 2000s when I was a full-time hospitalist into the mid 2010s, I always had a decent bedside manner and could always listen to patient stories. But when I communicated, it was a kind of crafting. It was a kind of a, what do I want this person to know that's going to be helpful for them? Kind of the way a teacher would. You don't give them all the information. You hold some stuff back. You do have an agenda. There is an agenda. Like there's something that you think is better for them, and you tell them, if it were me or if it were my loved one, I would want to do this, and so on and so forth. And what I find later is there's a holding of space and an expression of all the conditioning that you've had to train you to be a doctor or a nurse or whatever you do. All that training is there. It is like when remember earlier we were talking about meditating while driving a car, which I didn't recommend, but there's the natural aspect of life showing up. That is the meditation, that driving, you can recognize, wow, driving is mostly unconscious. Your senses are dilated and sharp. There's attention going in different places, but a lot of it is this unconscious conditioning. That's how most of medicine is. It's an unconscious years and years and years and 10,000 plus hours of conditioning. So when you relax and dilate and this kind of self-center becomes vague or drops, then you're with this apparent other, but there's no other. There's just the happening, and expression happens, but the space that's held is picked up by the other person directly. And in a sense, they, for lack of a better way of talking about it, they feel seen and they open up even more. And so what I find now is, and I've always had a little bit of this tendency, the people open up around me, but now it's like ridiculous. Now it's kind of like, wow. Even I get surprised sometimes at how open people get because you're just holding that space. So in medicine, sure, absolutely. You can open that way. It can get to be a lot though, so you have to realize when the body's telling you, okay, you're energetically, the demands are exceeding the capacity of this body-mind. And you have to take a little break or set up a quiet space or whatever. And that can be hard in a fucking private equity driven bullshit mill of corporate medicine. So sometimes you have to say, fuck it. Or find a place that will work for you. Mona says, is it normal to go silent after the awakening? Yeah, some people definitely go silent. That's probably the preferred. If there's advice, it's like, yeah, just shut the fuck up and sit in this, marinate in this as long as you can. Can't say a word about it. So why? Why get back in the head? Why give the mind an excuse to come back and make a story out of this? That is not, that is the ground of all stories. And even that's a story. Oh my God, it's 7:18. What the living hell? All right, I think it's time to wrap up, gang. We did a thing, hour and 5 minutes. Ian says, I'm a math teacher, and the number one thing I see in students that struggle is massive amounts of self-doubt. If they can move beyond their doubt for a moment, their capabilities immediately. That's it. Doubt is thought. Doubt is the prison of thought. Doubt happens during awakening, prior to awakening, after awakening, doubt. Doubt is the Achilles heel of the human condition. And it's innocent because it's trying to keep us safe. No. Don't do that. That's not safe. Don't do that. That's not safe. Totally get it. Doubt makes sense in some level until it doesn't. And if you can see past the doubt, or see what doubt for what it is, see doubt for doubt, it's thought. It's a bird, beautiful bird tweeting, as my wife would say, then that's it. All right, guys. Love you. Juliet says, I can't even know if anything has shifted. Bingo. There are days when I sit here and I'm like, nothing has happened. What even is this? What is all this realization? I don't get it. It's like that. It can definitely feel like that. Yep. Because it's just this. It's just whatever's showing up. That's what it is. So just let it be. Thank you, Ian. All right. Good night, Nocturne. Good night, everyone. Good night, John Boy. Good night, Sue Ellen. Remember the Waltons? Oh, I'm so old. All right. I love you guys. How do I end this? I got to go over here. I got to end it. Peace out, Napoleon. Oh, do me a favor. Subscribe. Smash that like button. Leave a comment. Helps the algorithm. And that's all we care about here in YouTube world. It's all empty, people. It's all empty radiance. Peace.